بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum. First of all, thank you for staying to listen to me. I know that you all have a lot to do and probably a long way to drive home. First, I just want to say how much of an honor it was for me to have been invited to keynote such an important event. Bayan is one of the pillars of the American Muslim community, bringing about and producing leaders for our community. And it was Chicago, and so I couldn't say no. Chicago, whenever I come back to Chicago, it really feels like a homecoming. I don't know. Yeah, okay. You all. So I grew up, this is kind of my second hometown. I grew up in Madison, Wisconsin. Yeah, that's right. We've got two Badgers here. I went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and when I was growing up, we had a pretty small Muslim community, so Chicago was our surrogate Muslim community. I went to youth camp at MCC. I went to Minna here. I've got Habib back there, where I know so many of you through these experiences, and they were formations of my identity. And that's why I think it's so important to support an organization like Bayan, because it is how our young people's identities are formed, by having leaders around them, role models, mentors, that help them understand who they are. You know, my day job is I'm a director of research at the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding. We do research on the American Muslim community, and we do education and workshops to explain this research to decision makers and the general public. And one of the findings that we discovered over the past year that I found the most unsettling was that Islamophobia in America is in decline. Now, that's actually the good news. It's in decline among every single faith community except one. And that one community where it's actually inching up year after year is Muslims themselves. Internalized Islamophobia is on the rise. And it's on the rise especially among our young people. And so there is this crisis of identity, having, endured the last 4 years with an administration that made us their central campaign promise, and the banning of people like us from our country. And coming of age and growing up in a country where our identity was politicized and often demonized. And that has a toll on how our young people and all of us really think of ourselves. And it has a toll on our mental health. And that's another key area of research where we've uncovered a real impact on American Muslims' mental health. And so when I hear about the kinds of programs and the kinds of education that Bayan is providing, it's literally the medicine that our community needs. And it is this prophetic leadership that Bayan is educating on and spearheading that I wanted to reflect on with you. Because it is this kind of leadership that we are in such dire need of. And I am not a scholar by any stretch of the imagination, but I am a student of the Sirah and of the Quran. And I have spent probably the last 25 years reflecting on the Sirah. And I wanted to share some thoughts on the five qualities of prophetic leadership. And it seemed like every single one, and this wasn't planned, was being expressed in one of the students' brief comments as they accepted their degrees. So the five qualities of prophetic leadership that I think we are in such desperate need of in the American Muslim community is what I'd like to focus my remarks on. And the first one might surprise you, might sound a little counterintuitive from everything we heard, but it's actually to approach leadership with caution and even some reluctance. And that is because it is about a responsibility and a very heavy duty, and not prestige or fame or privilege. And Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam, when he was first called to preach, he was called not as, "O Prophet," he was called, "O covered one, ya ayyuhal muddathir," because this great responsibility terrified him. And he wrapped himself up in a blanket, as we, all of us in our human condition, when we are terrified, all we want to do is cocoon ourselves. And it was so beautiful what I just heard about Khadija radiallahu anha as a support for him, because it was to her that he went, right? And he said, "Cover me," because this call to leadership, to change the world, to accept his role as the greatest and most perfect creation, was something that made him shake inside. And that is exactly how we should approach leadership. Something that we have to take very seriously and approach with an enormous amount of caution and reverence. Because it has to come from a place of a sense of responsibility and a desire to serve, rather than any worldly gain, just as our example did. And it is in line with this idea that the second quality of prophetic leadership comes in, which is to address the powerful and the powerless with equal dignity and equal humanity. And I'd like to share a story from the Seerah that not many people have heard. I've shared this story with even students, much better students than I, of the Seerah, and they said they never heard it. So I'm excited to share it with you, because I think it is so powerful and so relevant to the work of chaplaincy and really the work of any servant of the community. And it is that the Prophet ﷺ, on his hijrah, on his migration, being hunted down and with a prize on his head of 100 red camels, which is the equivalent of literally millions of dollars in today's currency. He was a target for assassination, and anyone who would bring him back to the Quraysh, his enemies, dead or alive, would receive this prize. And so he was migrating under this threat with Abu Bakr, his best friend, radiallahu anhu, and a guide who actually happened to not be a Muslim. And they were very close to reaching Medina. They had had an incredibly arduous journey. They had closely, all these close encounters with certain death. And finally they were, in the home stretch, and they were finally going to be in the safety of Medina. And there was this one mountain pass that they had to go through or circumvent or go around. And so the guide said this mountain pass is sort of like terrorized by these two bandits, thieves, who rob and kill anyone who walks in this path. So let's go around it, let's avoid it, let's get ourselves to Medina where we can be safe. And Rasulullah ﷺ said, "Oh, no, take me to them. Not let's take our chances, maybe they won't see us. No. He said, take me to them." And the guide's like, okay, sort of like, you're the boss. So he led them into this mountain pass, And as they went and they were actually trying to approach and find these two men, and the two men saw Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam, and the dialogue between them was هذا اليماني, meaning this is the man from Yamani. There's an explanation of why this refers to the Prophet. The point being, long story short, they knew exactly who he was, which meant they knew exactly what he was worth if he was captured or killed. And remember, these were criminals. So it wasn't just that Rasulullah was wasting his time on these two criminals when he should just be trying to get to safety, but he was risking his life to save the souls of these two bandits. And so he approached them before they went out to find him. And this was the first time that this had ever happened to them, where someone wanted to meet them. And he approached them, and they were so taken aback by the fact that he was coming to them. And he asked them, "What are your names?" Approached them as humans, as human beings, as fellow human beings. And they said, "We are the humiliated." They didn't even have individual names. And he said to them, "No, you are the noble." And he started to speak to them about Islam and their human dignity and their relationship with the one and only true God. And they embraced Islam. And then he said to them, "Come with me, we're going all together to Medina." They joined him and went with him to Medina. So what do we call people who met the Prophet ﷺ, shook his hand, and spent time with him? We call them Sahaba. This story has so many lessons for us as leaders that no one is not worth our time. No one is beyond redemption. And that seeing the humanity in people, that every saint has a past and every sinner has a future, because that's what our leader, our role model did. And when you do that, you transform people. So the third one flows from that, and that is be compassionate. The third principle of prophetic leadership is that rahmah, compassion, is our salient quality, should be our salient quality. I loved what I heard some of the chaplaincy graduates said about learning empathy as a part of the curriculum. It's such a beautiful demonstration of prophetic leadership. And there's so many examples of the Prophet's compassion, and he is literally described by Allah as a compassion for all the worlds, that he was not sent except to be an act of compassion for all the worlds. And it's so amazing because he was so many things. He was a strong leader. He was an educator. He was an amazing father and husband. He was an amazing military leader and political strategist. And yet, his salient quality, the one that Allah chose to enshrine in the scripture for all time, was his quality of rahmah. I think my favorite story that illustrates the rahmah of Rasulullah was the one when he finds out that one of the companions, Hatib ibn Abi Balta'a, tries to send news to the Meccans about the Muslim invasion that is coming. I mean, imagine this today. This happened today in a modern democracy, where this life or death, war and peace, piece of intelligence is shared with the enemy that has been fighting you now for a decade and more, and even before that, persecuting you in your own homeland. And to send news of the invasion or of the coming, the Fath of Mecca, where it would, had that news reached the Meccans, which it didn't, it was intercepted. Had that news reached them, it would have caused, the death of Sahaba. This is not a small matter. This is something that would have you, tried for treason and executed in a modern democracy. And for this Sahabi to have been forgiven after being asked, first of all, he was even asked to justify, what were you thinking? Why did you do this? And he said, my family has no protectors, and I thought that if I gave the Meccans this information, that it might give me some protection for my family. And that reason was enough for the Prophet ﷺ to forgive this man. I think this act of incredible compassion is so badly needed in our communities, where we hold grudges and have infighting for things that are so much smaller, where we can't let go of this imagined or real slight that someone did against us 25 years ago. And to actually embrace this act, this incredible spiritual act of forgiveness. And there are so many examples. The fourth quality of prophetic leadership that we desperately need in the Muslim American community is to follow in the Prophet's footsteps as an anti-racist. The Prophet ﷺ and Islam's teachings aren't simply for us to be not racist, so that's a good start, right? That's a good start. But to actually be actively anti-racist. The difference between being not racist and anti-racist is that being not racist, even if that is what our goal is, means that we're still allowing and passively acquiescing to what is the kind of status quo of baseline racism in our society. Anti-racism means recognizing that this is a sickness in our society that we have to actively work against. And I'm just going to give you one example of how Rasulullah ﷺ did this. We often learn in Seerah class, in Sunday school, at least that's how I learned it, that Rasulullah appointed Osama ibn Zayd as the head of the army at the age of 17. Osama was only 17 when he was appointed to lead an army, which had people like Umar ibn al-Khattab, radiallahu anhu, and Abu Sufyan, and all of these big names and Meccan nobility under his command. And he was only 17, and we always hear that. What we might not hear or isn't emphasized is who his parents were, right? Osama ibn Zayd is a former slave, and his mother was Ayman, an African woman. And this was no accident, and I'm not saying that Osama wasn't amazing and talented, because of course he was. But Rasulullah wanted to exemplify and model a very important principle to disassemble a hierarchy that existed before Islam, a hierarchy of race and class. And so his appointment of Osama did all of that. So we have to see ourselves as playing a role in our country of leading, not following, and certainly we shouldn't be participating in the societal norms that many times we're blind to, we're nose blind to, we're so used to, of this racial and class-based hierarchy. And then number 5, my final point, is to choose the akhirah every time. And part of that means to relinquish personal vendettas for the bigger cause and to let go when it's time to let go. Because we need to approach leadership with caution. So Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam was given the choice of eternal life and power and to govern and be a king forever on this earth, or to return to Allah, and he chose Allah. Now, none of us are going to ever be given that kind of a choice, but I think we can draw a lesson from the choice he made, which is that he fulfilled his duty of delivering the message, and then he chose the akhirah. How often do we overstay our time and refuse to let go of organizations that may benefit from new ideas, new blood, and this refusal to let go, this refusal to truly choose the akhirah and the greater good, sometimes can rip apart communities. Brothers and sisters, our community and our country is in desperate need of servant leaders. And Bayan is one critical component of bringing them about and training them. And I hope that you'll join me in supporting them. Thank you.